Hey there, welcome back to the Alter Your Health podcast, Medicinal Monday. I'm Dr. Ben,
I'm Dr. Susanna.
and we are both naturopathic doctors who empower you to heal yourself with whole food, plant-based nutrition, as well as mind-body medicine. And today on Medicinal Monday, we're talking about skin. We're talking about specifically eczema, atopic dermatitis, which is one of the most common skin conditions. It's really common in kiddos, but a lot of adults get it as well and intermittently. And it's got a lot of dermatologists kind of scratching their heads and just dishing out steroid creams, or maybe you're just going right to the topical over-the-counter steroid creams and resolving it. But maybe it's rearing its ugly head, every now and again. And maybe there are other conditions that could be linked with or associated with. So we're going to unpack this topic and hopefully support you and empower you to know how to heal yourself.
Yes, and this topic was actually suggested by someone to us, a listener. And so if there are any other topics that you are all wanting to learn more about, please reach out to us. You can send us an email or reach out to us on one of the social media platforms. And we're always looking for great episode topics. So thank you. Thank you. And so, yes, we're talking specifically about eczema today. We have previous episodes on just skin health and acne, but this is our very first eczema episode.
Yeah.
So,
and it just occurred to me that the topic of eczema did come up when I was talking with one of our neighbors in the area here locally, Dr. Sarah Villafranco, and she has a topical, I wouldn't say a skincare products, but soaps and oils and potions and stuff. And she's really mindful of the irritation that can be induced from conventional skincare products. That's one cause of eczema. Just spoiler alert, that we can just be kind of constantly irritating our skin. And it's just a natural inflammatory response to chemicals and irritants on our skin. That's sometimes more referred to as contact dermatitis, but it can kind of morph into atopic dermatitis or eczema.
Yeah, so today we're really going to focus more on atopic dermatitis, which is an inflammatory skin condition that's often associated with other signs of atopy. Some of those symptoms are asthma, allergy. The atopic triad is asthma, allergy, and eczema.
I think about that most certainly in terms of kiddos. Kids often present with one or two or three of these,
but not everyone does
come on together or migrate between these different symptoms.
But yeah, everyone presents with all of these symptoms. But I just read that eczema is a third of dermatology appointments. And this other statistic you have here is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, that the incidence of eczema has tripled about in the last 50 years, since the 1970s to I guess we're in the 2020s. There's 3 times the rates of eczema, and still the eczema, the incidence of eczema is most common in children, and a lot of pediatricians just kind of say, oh, they'll grow out of that. They'll grow out of that. And most oftentimes that's the truth. I think more than half of the majority of kids, quote unquote, grow out of eczema. But oftentimes it's just traded for another chronic condition, because, chronic skin conditions can often be associated with other chronic digestive conditions or autoimmune inflammatory conditions of other sorts, right?
Yeah. So today we're really aiming to understand what eczema is, where it comes from, because like you said, Dr. Ben, it's so common to just treat the symptoms, to just treat topically and to suppress the rash. But where's it actually coming from?
Yeah, it reminds me, your dad, my father-in-law, is dermatologically oriented and minded. He's pretty knowledgeable in a lot of senses. And I remember he said that there's 2 rules in dermatology, and I actually Googled this and found it was validated. It's kind of a joke, but not really. The 2 basic rules of dermatology: if it's wet, dry it; if it's dry, wet it. And in the case of eczema, it's dry, so you put some wet on it, moisturizers, barrier enhancers, and of course, if it's inflamed, anti-inflame it.
Right.
kill the inflammation.
Right, and those are the other two very common themes in dermatology is the prescription of either an anti-inflammatory steroid or the prescription of some kind of, antimicrobial or antifungal or antibiotic type of thing. And so obviously in the case of eczema, topical steroids are the most common prescribed treatment.
But yeah, what is going on
What
with
is
eczema?
going on? Why does it
Let's
crop up?
shift gears and talk about it, Dr.
Yeah.
Susan.
So we're going to talk about 3 underlying systems that can contribute to this chronic inflammatory skin condition. We're going to talk about how the immune system plays a role, how the digestive system plays a role, and how the liver plays a role.
Well, I think about immune system and digestive system as kind of
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
We actually have an episode from a few months, maybe 6 months ago or so, talking about the gut immune connection and the relationship between the immune system that lies beneath the single cell layer thick membrane of your digestive lining.
Yeah.
That's called the GALT, the gut associated lymphoid tissue.
Right. Yeah. So let's start there. Let's start by talking about the digestive system because it really is shown that a lot of individuals who have eczema have also some underlying gut inflammation in their intestines.
And I think that this is sometimes confused because that isn't always associated with digestive symptoms, right? Some people can have no digestive symptoms. They don't have any bloating or constipation or diarrhea or irregular bowel movements or things like that. But there is still what we would say subclinical inflammation in the digestive system. Predominantly this quote unquote leaky gut phenomenon that's activating the immune system, again, right below the intestinal lining, and leading to this chronically dysregulated immune response that we know is, I don't know how much we want to talk about the Th2 response, but this is like a Th2 dominant phenomenon. The eczema, the allergies, the asthma, these kind of things tend to be Th2 dominated. We don't have to get too much into the weeds there, but
I do want to take a little step back because you just said a lot in like one sentence that was, pretty medically, lots of medical terms in there.
We got smart listeners.
I know we do. But I just want to kind of paint the picture of really this gut and immune connection because we know that our gut lining is just one cell thick. And so if that gut lining is inflamed, our gut barrier is no longer strong or resilient. And like you said, right on the other side of that one cell thick layer of our gut lining is this lymphoid tissue called the gut associated lymphoid tissue. And so this kind of GALT is the acronym, is essentially, it's filled with lots of white blood cells, lots of immune cells. And so what happens when we have basically a permeable gut lining is that all sorts of things that we don't want can move across the gut lining into that GALT and really mount an inflammatory response, an immune response, which is our healthy, innate defense response against foreign pathogens or toxins or whatever might be coming their way into our GALT and further then into our bloodstream. But it can create this kind of chronic inflammatory condition that can then lead to systemic inflammation, including the inflammation of the skin.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, this is often the underlying cause of a lot of other quote unquote autoimmune sort of related illnesses and conditions and symptoms.
Yes.
So another thing that's really important when we're talking about digestive health, and a lot of people might be wondering like, well, how does one fix that? How does one prevent that? And a cool thing to know is that in a healthy gut, and a healthy gut really exists on a spectrum, right? Because I don't know what an ideal gut looks like. I know what a textbook says and stuff, but we're all on this spectrum, and our gut and the environment within the gut is always changing moment to moment, day by day, depending on what the environment is like, what we're putting in, what our stress levels, what our hormone levels, what our digestive enzymes are doing, what pathogens or organisms are living there, coexisting with our, microbes, the microbiome. But the fact is that our microbiome, which is a constantly in flux, evolving entity of trillions and trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms, that microbiome creates a stronger barrier. So we do have that one cell thick lining, that digestive lining, but the reality is we've got a much more resilient barrier when we're talking about a quote unquote healthy optimal gut, because of that microbiome that secretes the biofilm that has this kind of anti-inflammatory soothing coating that is like a little armor for the intestinal cells, so that the compounds that are flowing through our gut can stay in the gut and be digested optimally, rather than go through a hyperpermeable membrane and cause that immune response.
Right. Right. And so it's funny because actually before this episode, I was just for fun looking through some of our old notes from medical school. I wanted to see what our dermatology teacher taught us about interventions, natural interventions, and even a lot of those interventions. Some of them were aiming at this root cause of digestive function, digestive health, and microbial diversity. But the interventions were probiotics and glutamine. And so probiotics is a way that some people think is a good way to increase that healthy, balanced microbiome. We have many episodes where we talk about how that's not necessarily the case. But you see how the thought was on the right track, right?
When you're talking about and that's a great example of green apathy, or like not bashing on functional medicine, but oftentimes it's like, what's the supplement that can help me achieve the result? But we can achieve the result without supplements most of the time.
Right.
And most people don't have a probiotic deficiency. Most people don't have a glutamine deficiency.
Right.
But probiotics can augment the microbiome, and glutamine can feed the microbiome.
Well, really, sorry to interrupt, but glutamine is essentially there to help strengthen the gut lining barrier.
Not feed the microbiome, feed the gut lining itself, so that it can repair itself.
Exactly.
How we feed the microbiome, we know it goes right down to the basics, the fundamentals of lifestyle medicine, just eating nutrient-dense, fiber-rich, low toxicity foods that are free from herbicides and pesticides and antibiotics and other, heavy metals and contaminants that irritate that intestinal lining and microbiome.
Right. Yeah, we'll be talking more about that at the end. But also just to talk a little bit more about the immune system component. Really, what we've already said here is that the way to balance the immune system is to really support that gut health and seal up that gut lining, because then we're not going to have that aggravated, inflamed GALT lymphoid tissue. But it's funny because some people also attempt to balance that immune response also with supplements. You'll find all sorts of supplements that claim that they downregulate that Th2 response that you mentioned. But once again, this is kind of a Band-Aid effect. This isn't really addressing the foundational, causes, the foundational ways that we can actually correct this imbalance.
Yeah, so I guess we're kind of beating around the bush in terms of what those foundational curative
lifestyle practices,
lifestyle therapeutic interventions are. And it is just a matter of healing the gut, which doesn't happen overnight. And we've got to start the process by introducing more diversity of more fiber-rich whole plant foods. But in that process, you've got some notes here. Things like celery juice or green juices in general, which are really healing and cleansing and soothing and nourishing. Of course, they've got all the nutrients and hydration and really soothing to the intestinal lining. I think about also things like aloe vera juice, the gel, not the leaf, and that's got such soothing effects so that your digestive system can regenerate and heal itself, and that barrier can be closed up and fortified. What other highlights from our list here?
Well, yeah, so let's just focus on the gut stuff here and not the liver stuff, because we haven't talked about liver yet. But just the most important thing long-term for sustainable gut health and microbial balance is to eat a diet that is rich in whole plant foods.
Okay, so we already covered that.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, and then the other connection, like you just alluded to, the liver skin connection, because we know that talk about how the liver is responsible for taking toxins, converting them to water-soluble toxins for them to be excreted from the body. But if that liver isn't doing its job, that liver is sluggish and backed up and overwhelmed, then a lot of that toxicity can spill out through our emunctories, primarily the skin being the biggest emunctory. We've got a huge surface area of skin that toxicity can attempt to pour out through. And that's where a lot of chronic skin conditions can come into play. And this is where I think about more of the adult onset eczema.
Yeah.
Adult onset eczema, of course, maybe there is a digestive component for sure, but oftentimes more so a liver component as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And, it's interesting. This was the topic of our podcast last week, liver health. And I was writing an article on liver health last week, and I was looking for some scientific literature to really back up what we were saying. And
It's always been true.
yes. And it was interesting to find a study specifically on NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is, the more, that's after sluggish liver, right? A sluggish liver can become a fatty liver. But this study was really showing the association between NAFLD and inflammatory skin conditions like eczema, like acne, like psoriasis.
Yeah.
So that science there shows that liver skin connection. And it's interesting, you mentioned the celery juice, and one thing that I have seen that's interesting is that some people who do have eczema, if they drink the celery juice regularly, they might actually have kind of a flare up at first because they're actually releasing more toxins through the skin. They haven't yet really reclaimed their full liver capacity to detoxify in that healthy way. So it can take time for the liver to really regain its full function in detoxification for that eczema to fully resolve.
That's a really good point. And that, a lot of people don't like talking about the healing crisis and how things can get worse before they get better. But usually that worsening is more acute and a little bit, more intense and short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
And people, that tends to happen when we're on a curative path.
Right. So of course, other things that help with liver health, we talked all about it last week. So go listen to last week's episode.
But cleansing, what that means, the importance of nutrient density, the importance of focusing on the lower fat, quote unquote, foods. And a lot of people think, if I've got eczema, I should be eating all sorts of healthy fats because I need to create those cellular membranes because the fatty acids work their way into the cellular membranes. And that's what creates that barrier that I need. That's not necessarily the case, especially when we're thinking about optimizing the health of the liver.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, very important stuff. I think that we should shift gears and talk about the topical conversation, because quite honestly, I think about topical irritants. I know that contact dermatitis, which is generally what, what are some examples of chemicals
like a nickel allergy to earrings or to jewelry?
Yeah, or you were using bleach like the other day, or some caustic cleaning chemical, and you got some redness on your hand or something like that.
It was my skin started peeling off, but
that would be contact dermatitis.
But I have gotten a real case of contact dermatitis from using Neosporin, which was extremely uncomfortable and bitchy.
Yes, contact dermatitis is kind of that acute cause of an irritant topically causing irritation to the skin. But like I kind of started off the conversation saying, a lot of people have chronic contact dermatitis. I would call it that kind of is atopic dermatitis from soaps and lotions and laundry detergents and fragrances and toothpaste. And I learned from Dr. Sarah Villafranca, who's got the company Osmia, where they've got all sorts of natural skincare products. And sodium lauryl sulfate, I didn't learn from her, but she reminded me of this, and it's really a focus of her expertise. Sodium lauryl sulfate, which is an ingredient in so many topical skincare products and laundry detergents, and it's a foaming agent, but it's really something that a lot of people develop this chronic sensitivity to that can exacerbate eczema. Maybe it's not the underlying cause of eczema, But if we're trying to heal our skin while still irritating it from the top topically, we're gonna have a hard time, right?
Right.
So when I think about healing the skin topically, what comes to mind for me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Dr. Susanna, but like less is more. We want to just take away things and just do the minimal amount that we can, whether it's just a real, like a jojoba oil, just like a real simple topical soothing agent, or aloe vera gel. But so often we put these topical, compounds or products on our skin that have a laundry list of ingredients that can actually be doing more harm than good.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, when you say less is more, I agree. Less, fewer products, less washing of the skin, because
Yeah.
that chronic washing can also disrupt that skin barrier. And so, yeah, I mean, when I think, topical and just like skin health, I'm thinking, what can we do to really rebuild the health of that natural skin barrier? Because we do have this barrier on our skin that keeps the moisture from escaping our skin. Exactly. And what can happen when people get eczema is that barrier is disrupted because of the inflammation, and then it's more susceptible to getting irritated again, and then it kind of creates this cycle. And that's why sometimes using the topical steroids can actually help break that cycle for some people.
Oh, totally.
Especially in those like very, very uncomfortable examples and scenarios. And so, it's not like we're totally anti-steroids or anything at all. I used them when I had that horrible contact dermatitis.
Yeah, it's like calling the fire department to put out the fire. But if you've got someone throwing, firecrackers into the fire, or pouring gasoline on the fire, I guess is the more appropriate metaphor, then the fire department's not going to be able to do much use.
Right. But yeah, in terms of helping to kind of rebuild that natural skin barrier, yeah, I think there's natural topicals that can help, and especially having some kind of, like you mentioned, some jojoba oil. There's actually a study on using a combination of olive oil, beeswax, and honey. Those three ingredients mixed together, applied to eczema, can help to manage the symptoms and help to heal it quicker.
Yeah,
So
because the honey's got a little bit of a immunological, like antimicrobial, but also anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, and the beeswax creates more of that barrier, so it helps to kind of keep the moisture in. But what is more important is that we create that healthy environment on our skin so that we have our own natural, innate, resilient skin barrier. And this is what we talk about in much greater depth in our natural skincare episode that we recorded like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But essentially, we want to maintain a good microbial environment on our skin. We want to maintain a healthy pH mantle, meaning we want the pH of our skin to be just slightly acidic, which is the perfect environment for those beneficial microbes to thrive. And essentially, the more soaps and weird kind of chemical products we use on our skin, the more prone we are to disrupt that natural harmony on our skin.
It's the truth.
So this is actually where, there are skin regimens like the caveman regimen, which, takes away all of the
We could go on and
washing and products and everything. But this is where we would recommend that you turn over to the natural skincare episode to learn more about that.
So let's summarize the approach to dealing with eczema. And I think that we need to summarize things from the outside in and inside out level. Outside in is consider all the irritants that might be coming on from the sodium lauryl sulfate and the laundry detergent, mouthwash, toothpaste. Like even if you have like sensitivity throughout your body, it's not just a mouth thing, the toothpaste can still be the culprit. Also, lotions and soaps and shampoos and conditioners, of course. And then considering things like digestive health and the health of your gut lining and microbiome, focusing on nutrient density, organic, avoiding pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, irritants, things that disrupt that microbiome and gut lining. And playing the long game. Playing the long game is really important because we have to be invested in our health and kind of break free from this quick fix, like give me a steroid, give me an anti-inflammatory for the inflammation. We got to create the anti-inflammatory lifestyle. So it is a long game, but in the process, there are natural things like celery juice, that can support and soothe the, inflammation in the digestive system, support the liver, and all of these sort of things. And I feel like we're kind of a little bit all over the place in today's episode, but
well, there's lots of different components to bring together when we're talking about eczema. But interestingly enough, as we're wrapping up, in 2 weeks, we will be starting our anti-inflammatory whole food plant-based challenge.
That's
and
right.
It is a free event. We invite you all to join us. We'll be hosting this again on our Facebook group. We're going back to Facebook because we realized it's
if you're not on Facebook, you don't have to get on Facebook.
Right.
We're trying to accommodate everyone,
We
which
are.
is impossible, but we're trying.
Yes.
So stay tuned. You can find out more at www.alter.health. Registration is not quite open, but it will be real soon. And we're looking forward to another challenge.
Yeah.
So on that note, we hope you have an anti-inflammatory day and a cleansing, nourishing day. And we look forward to connecting next time.
Bye for now.